Welcome everybody to Epic X-Men Reread, presented by Crushing Comics. I'm here with my friends Tyler and Fariha, and we are together because we are rereading the classic run of Chris Claremont's X-Men. We started with giant-size X-Men, and we're going at least until the Dark Phoenix saga. Why? Because Tyler and I have read these before, and Fariha has not. And as a newly minted X-Men expert, Fariha has read a lot of X-Men, but she hasn't read these. So we're kind of seeing them again through her eyes. So here's a couple of notes before we get started. This episode, we're going to be tackling Marvel Team Up 1972, issue 89. We're also going to be tackling Uncanny X-Men Annual 3, which in many places is just X-Men Annual 3 because they didn't start with the Uncanny title. And even X-Men at this point wasn't technically Uncanny X-Men. And also we're going to read the backup story in Classic X-Men 31. If you want to see the whole X-Men reading order, just go to my website, crushingcrisis.com, crushingcrisis with a K.com, and you can see this full X-Men reading order there. And then the final note that I need to give is that spoilers abound for the future of the Marvel Universe. And although it probably doesn't have too much relevance to these issues, we might hint at some of the developments in House of X and Powers of X, because that's part of what inspired us to do this read together. So you've been warned, but if we're going to get into any more specifics than that from stuff from 2019 and forward, we will give you ample warning. Hi, folks.
Hi.
I was thinking today, since this is about Nightcrawler running away and returning to the circus, that we could talk about an early memory of like a circus or zoo, you know, because at the time when we were all younger, circuses still were like an animal show, which they're not as much now. Now it's much more like Cirque du Soleil, acrobatic type stuff. Fariha, do you have an early memory of like a circus or a zoo that you can share with us?
So the zoo, it's like, it's one of those stories that my family tells. So it's like, I'm not sure if it actually happened because apparently I was too young. So the whole thing was I went to the zoo. Apparently I went to the zoo with my uncle or cousins or whatever. And they had to bring me out of there in tears because I wanted to bring the tiger home with me. So like, I saw the tiger and I'm like, no, I'm going to take the tiger with me. So now, as an adult, after years, and then, that story may have been stuck in my consciousness. I have a mini Black Panther at home. It's a live mini Black Panther.
She's rustling around in the background there.
Yeah, she's rustling around in the background all the time. And if you have seen our show, she had made cameo appearances. And she's named after Mystique. So her name is Lady Darko. But then it started there, wanting a tiger, but then settling for Justice Ferocious mini Black Panther.
I actually have almost the inverse of that story in a way. So we used to go to the zoo all the time. Philadelphia Zoo is the oldest zoo in America. It's a really beautiful zoo. Mm-hmm. And at the time they have less animals now. They had polar bears and elephants. Elephants are not really a zoo animal anymore. And I just have all these memories of sitting on the elephant and seeing the polar bears and all these things. And I was convinced by the time I was in like intermediate school that I was going to be a veterinarian. I wanted to do like a sciencey doctory thing, but I didn't want to be responsible for the health of human beings. So I was like, animals, that would be great. Except for I had no experience with animals whatsoever. Like we had like 2 house cats, but I didn't have dogs, or I had never been to a farm or anything. Like I was making this assumption purely on being a kid who had liked going to the zoo and liking house cats. And so finally, when I was in like 8th or 9th grade, the zoo was like accepting kids to come on as like interns over the summer to be in the children's zoo and probably just like clean up goat poop, quite frankly. And I just remember I went there for the first day, like I got dropped off at the back zoo entrance and I walked in and I just was beside myself. They were like, you just need to pick up this armadillo. I'm like, you want me to touch the armadillo? And then they're like, we just need you to clean out this rabbit, cage. And I was like, but what if the rabbit charges me? Like I was so sheltered because I didn't have anybody in my family who had pets or had a farm or had anything, that I had this vision in my head that was not matching up with reality at all. So I did my day and I came home and I was like, I don't think I'm going to be a veterinarian because I hadn't really considered that I actually find a lot of these animals a little bit scary to deal with directly. And it wasn't even like I was working with like lions and tigers and bears. We were at the like rabbit and armadillo level. Uh, so it turned out that I wasn't going to be a veterinarian, but it's funny to me now because, my daughter is in that similar phase of kids. Kids just like animals. I think a lot of kids, you teach them animal sounds and then they go to the zoo and they see all the animals. And it's really funny because she has gone to the Wellington Zoo's program, which is brilliant, their kids program, and do all the take care of the animals things. And when she got home, I was like, so what'd you think about that? What'd you like about those animals? Because we don't have house pets or anything. So this was her first time really ever being exposed to animals. She's kind of still into them. We have a friend who keeps chickens and we went over and she wanted to do this whole examination of the chicken. She wanted to redesign the chicken coop. She wanted to examine the chicken's feathers. So I'm like, who knows? Maybe the next generation is going to be a veterinarian. You never know.
You know how there's in Marvel universe, there's offshoot of realities. There's one reality of ours where Peter is a veterinarian.
But I only work on cats. I'm a cat only veterinarian. I do love cats.
Yeah, cat only veterinarian. There.
Yeah. Well, I remember having a serious conversation could be in 8th grade about your career with my mom being like, could I be a veterinarian that wouldn't see dogs? Do I have to? And she's like, probably in veterinary school, you're going to have to learn about dogs.
Yeah, you can figure that out afterwards, that when you are in practice.
But you can't not learn about dogs.
Right.
Yeah. Tyler, do you have anything that can break up our zoo chat here?
Well, I mean, just to tag on to what you said, I wanted to be a vet too.
Aww.
So, yeah. So for a while, yeah. I mean, when I was younger, the cheapest animal that we could keep is fish.
I keep telling the kid that she's going to get a fish. If she has a house plant to take care of first. If she can keep that alive, then she can have a fish.
So it's when at that time, I do not know the whole way of how a tank works and how to keep fish alive. And so the fish keeps dying. And then, it wasn't good. And then, and so fast forward, to 2009 when I moved here. So I decided I was stressed. I can't remember because of school or because of work. And I decided that I need a fish tank to help me relax. And that's when I went really deep into it. I understood the nitrogen cycle. I understood how to keep the fish alive. And I went from a 33-gallon tank to a 55-gallon tank, and I kept a community of fish all the way up till 2000, all the way up to 2000. I would say 2012, 2013, and I had the big tank, and well, not really big by some other people's standard. So, but and then Hurricane Sandy hit, and the apartment lost power, and it got cold, and surprisingly, some fish did not die, even though it did not have heat, and they are tropical fish, and but a lot of fish actually died, and it was really cold, so my office was good enough. I mean, it was kind enough to put me in a hotel, but then there's no way I can keep the tank warm.
Oh no!
So I knew that I'm going to come back to a tank of dead fish, and I did come back to a tank of a lot of dead fish, but surprisingly, some fishes were alive. I think partly is because I kept a tank with live plants, so the plants were actually absorbing all the decomposed dead fish, so that the cycle was actually going on. So, and it happens that those fish that managed to survive in the cold. So that was the thing. But later on, I had to get rid of them because because of other things. So so now.
So no fish now. You don't have any now.
No, I don't. Yeah, but I still watch a lot of aquariums and fish videos when I'm free. Yeah,
that was a very sad story.
I know you were a downer. If we had planned that better, we would have had you go first. And
yeah.
Now I'm just gonna be thinking about all of your sad, dead, lonely fish.
Yeah. And then you can make a whole comic book out of them. They're like, oh my god, we're dying. The humans not coming back. Dun dun dun. Oh, Tyler.
It does seem like a really sad, like indie graphic novel about like this person who like loves their fish and gets the fish, and then but like all the tragedies of the person's life are like through the fish's perspective.
Now
It's
you're
on
making
or
me
like
so
or like
sad.
shown by them like approaching the fish tank. Feels like something Jeff Lemire would write if it was about somebody who was also a sad
That's
dad.
true. Yeah.
Okay. So that had nothing to do really with our conversation today,
No.
but it made me. I thought of that because this Marvel team up issue, it's not one I'd ever read before, and it's Nightcrawler's circus career comes to haunt him in New York City because his old circus promoter who moved him over to the freak show is here, and he wants to kill Spider-Man for promotion for his new United States-based circus. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I don't know because I
Oh,
couldn't
Ty,
find
right.
the
This is a
issue.
rare one that Tyler did not read and Fariha did.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's like the world has inversed.
I couldn't find the digital issue, and it's not on Marvel Unlimited.
No, it is not in Marvel. I happen to have this one physically, which was my
Which is kind of surprising. Why is it not on Marvel Unlimited? Everything else before and after is on Marvel Unlimited.
I don't know.
So
there were some issues which were like blank and like no covers and everything.
And it's not like ROM is in it or something. Like it's not like it's because of rights, I don't think. Anyway.
No, there's nothing.
So look, there's two things that are significant to me here. One is that it shows that Nightcrawler can have fun on his own, and I think it's part of this Claremont thing that we started talking about last episode, where he's trying to like connect each of these international characters to a little piece of home, right? So Storm like tries to go back to her childhood apartment; it's a drug den. Colossus, decides to be the proletarian and go back to Mother Russia and gets kicked out again, and so Nightcrawler is reconnected to the circus-based part of his childhood, and he really delineates in a way that I think is useful, and I never had before because I never read this before, but he thinks of there being a difference between when he was an acrobat and when he was a freak. This was the line in his life between feeling accepted and feeling like one and feeling like he had a family, and being told, no, you're just one of the oddities. And that he has it's Nightcrawler, so he only has so much resentment about that, but it helps to bridge to where we meet him in Giant Size X-Men. So having read this for the first time, that was the first thing I found really interesting about it. What did you think about that angle, Fariha?
No, I mean, that also kind of makes sense though, because the thing is I think when he first joined the circus, it was fairly family owned, which a lot of circus tended to be. And I think then this person came and bought it, and then he got demoted in his world. And then the thing is what I think is something that we all I know a lot of us felt it, right? There's our because of who we are as a person, our actual skills didn't matter. It was based on our look, identity, and everything. We were pushed into a box, and that's what he was. He was othered. He was boxed into this. And I think that's one of the reasons he was so mad when we first met him in Giant Size X-Men. But then also I was a little bit more surprised that he and Amanda Sefton seems getting along just fine, and he appears to her as himself, which I thought that was very good. I mean, we've seen that in the arcade issues that we're doing, they are going on a date and then he's himself. But I wasn't sure when that happened. When did
they first met in Uncanny X-Men?
Right, but with the image inducer.
That's right.
He had an image inducer. So that's why I was confused by that. That it's so time has passed that he appears as himself to her. And it was very cute. It's he's oh, I can't stay mad at you. And they were flirting and everything. And then they were in the back of a truck. It's oh, do you know how many times I dreamt about being together? He was they were kind of in an awkward hugging situation.
Yeah, they're in a trunk. Yeah, and she's don't even try it.
Yeah, it's put your hands and tail to yourself. It's oh, I'm trying. So I think that I really connected, because he always had that self image issue, but I was oh, finally he's being accepted. So, and by a random person, a random lady that he just happened to meet. So yeah.
Yeah, and all that really jumped out at me. Claremont has written in these kind of random love interests for him and Colossus, and of course Amanda Sefton turns out not to be that random. But you don't really get a lot of play of them in the main Uncanny X-Men run, and I just feel here it was cute. Like, even when she makes the comment in the trunk, and a lot of other comics of this era would come off kind of creepy, like, but it was actually,
Yeah,
it was kind of just like really funny, sweet, casual flirting that really sold that like Nightcrawler has made a place for himself here in New York. And I just really loved it. Like, I really feel like I got something true and new out of this reading experience that I never had before. And Freya, something you just said really resonated with me, which is that like, you know, I'm not somebody who gets othered a whole lot in my life just because of how my identity, you know, presents itself, but I certainly have been, and certainly I'm in an environment now where I am the other all the time as the American, you know. Like, I mean, just talking about trunks of cars, like, we just got a very minor fender bender, and the person hit me, and I walked out of the car. And, you know, I've been here several years. I have a New Zealand driver's license. Like, this is where my life is. And I said, oh, hi, I just want to make sure you're okay. And of course, we can exchange information, but your health is the most important thing. And the guy looks me up and down. And he goes, what are you, some foreigner? And I was like, ooh, that's an othering that I don't get to experience all that often, that I'm sure the two of you have experienced in your lives before. And it wasn't like I was like broken or upset, you know, my fragile white self. I was like, oh, so that's what that feels like. Okay. Many white people never have had this firsthand experience before. And I was like, I'm a New Zealander. I have a New Zealand driver's license. Like, I'm a Kiwi. And he was like, all right, fine. And it just made me reflect on that. And just that, like, that othering tends to happen after a big transition in your life a lot of times, right? Like, you know, even when you get a new boss or something, and like the new boss comes in, they're like, so I heard you're the one that's good with numbers. And you're like, well, actually, I do all this other stuff too. And it's like, they're like, numbers, right? You know? So I just think that it was like a really human moment to learn that about Nightcrawler.
Yeah, and then it's also kind of like, you know, we also later on get to see him have like a team up with Spider-Man, and he's actually confused as the Spider-Man because he is running, you know. So and then Peter is there taking pictures, like, oh, he cannot be the Spider-Man because I'm Peter Parker and I know who
I am the
Spider-Man is.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. I'm like, oh, writers, please, Claremont, sir,
But I think
Grandpa.
It was funny because
you don't have to write it.
Claremont got to like basically say Nightcrawler is our Spider-Man. Like, he hasn't been super humorous up until this point, and this is Claremont, like the gears are clicking, and he's realizing that Nightcrawler is X-Men Spider-Man, and I just got a little zing out of that.
So isn't there like a Amazing Spider-Man and X-Men? There's a book where Spider-Man comes to teach them in the school
after the second volume of Wolverine and the X-Men, yes, and it's really good. It's very funny.
Yeah, and I think like at that time Nightcrawler was actually dead. There was a lot of introspection about it, or he just came back.
He just come back because Wolverine was alive when Nightcrawler came back.
Right.
So he would have just been alive long enough for Nightcrawler to come back and then died.
And then there was like a lot of little bands going around. Yeah. But I think like, you know, I felt like there was a little bit of friendship between Peter Parker is friends with everyone. So everyone like loves him. So I think like, you know, it just kind of a little bit call back to that. I felt like, you know, it's like, oh, they just kind of, you know, bounced together and then saved the thing.
So that was all my first point about this issue. Poor Tyler. The second point about this issue is I think that the art style is just so different than the art style in X-Men, which is like way more kind of illustrative, single-celled animation from a cartoon. This is much more realistic in this issue. It kind of reminded me like a little bit of Gene Colan-ish, even though it's not that level. In that it was like really drawn from life. And Nightcrawler just hits really differently when he's been drawn as this kind of scary blue demon amongst a lot of people who look more like real life and less cartoony. And I just felt like again and again when they're in the circus, all the big panels of Nightcrawler, I'm like, oh, that hits really different with more realistic art than it does under the pen of Cockrum-Merper. Did you have like an art reaction at all for you?
The copy I read was really bad. It was difficult to kind of see. But what I do remember is like it was very small panels, something that you don't usually see. Like, you know, like it's like small panels in action. Yeah. Which is like, I was like, whoa, that's kind of hard to decipher. Yeah. But then they also capture an elephant with like a net. That was fun.
Yeah.
And then the elephant just stops. And we're like, whoa. But yeah. So there's like all this kind of action scenes in them.
It's the thing that's what made me think about our opening topic, actually, because there's like an elephant left in New Zealand and it's about to move out. They're like shipping it to some other country where it could be on an elephant preserve. So it's this big, big deal that everybody's going to Auckland to see the elephant before it leaves if they've never seen it before, if they want to see it one last time. And like, I was like, whatever, like I've seen elephants at several different zoos as a kid because at the time when we were kids, elephants were more prevalent. But then I was like, oh, but my daughter has never seen an elephant and like this might be her only chance for many years. So like, just made me think of that. Okay, so now we're moving on to Uncanny X-Men Annual 3. And since Tyler has had to just totally tap out of that whole conversation, maybe Tyler can introduce us to this, the first of in a long line of total WTF X-Men annual stories from Chris Claremont. The annuals are where he just lets his freak flag fully fly.
He just do whatever he wants in the annual, and most of the time, well, I would say most of the time, like in the beginning, it will be something that has like nothing to do with the X-Men run at all.
No, never.
I mean, yeah. At the end, I mean, later on, of course, he builds into it.
Right.
He builds into the annual and he builds out of the annual. So, but in this case, at least for me, what is most notable is that this is the first and probably only time George Perez has drawn an X-Men book.
George Perez, classic artist and writer of Avengers, of Wonder Woman, of so many things.
New Teen Titans.
Yeah.
It's like he has never done an X-Men book except for this one. And I thought it was, I mean, the art is great.
It's beautiful.
It is. It's so detailed. And in some ways, and this is the first time I've noticed it, the faces here is actually quite Cockrum. Especially the Storm faces looks really like, Cockrum's face.
I was wondering if that was down a little bit to the inking because Terry Austin inks it, and I was trying to think of, does Austin ink Cockrum? I know Austin inks Byrne, so I was like flipping back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, it was really interesting. And and somehow I don't know if George Perez has any influence in how the story was done, because it starts with like an Avengers starts in the Avengers mansion with like Javier, and then like it goes into the before it comes into X-Men. But I mean, the story is fun, is okay. It is how it is a pretty standard type of story. I think
it's a very like mistaken identities, cross paths game of telephone kind of superhero story.
X-Men fought and helped save the dying world. It's nothing too special in terms of plot, but for me, I mean, the highlight is the art.
Some things I noticed about the art, and then I want to see what Fariha had to say about it, is it's really similar to Byrne. And to the point that you could be forgiven. I mean, Cyclops kind of looks like Byrne, Colossus kind of looks like the Byrne version. Yeah. But I will say that Perez draws certainly more detail than Byrne, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And he draws a little bit more anatomy on men than Byrne does. Like not that I'm always looking for this, but the men kind of have some supple bottoms in this issue. Did anybody else notice this? Is it just me? Like the men have got some booty in this issue. Like I forget, I first noticed it in the big spread at the beginning because Nightcrawler, even though he's like diving forward, Perez lovingly draws his lovely gentleman humps. And then Wolverine also just has these big quads and his muscles are bulging. And then later even Cyclops gets some booty as we see him walking away, much better than seeing him walking towards you in many cases. So I just really noticed that George Perez like draws the men a little bit more interestingly. Slightly cheesecake, ever so slightly male cheesecake. Fariha, did you notice this at all?
I noticed it. So the thing is, like, I actually didn't notice. I didn't notice that it was not Byrne until I got to the dawn, the land of shadow, dawn of death. Like, the when they went to the other world. I don't know what's the other world.
And you saw that splash, and you were like, "Well, that's not Byrne."
No. First of all, that's not Byrne. I'm like, "Oh, that's Wonder Woman."
Oh, it does really look like his Wonder Woman.
Yeah, okay. Because I read some of it's his Wonder Woman, and I actually got the 3 omnibuses to kind of read it. So I kind of flipped through it, and then he drew some of them, and then I was like, "Oh, that's Wonder Woman." And then I looked up, I'm like, "Who did it?" And then I went back and saw that it was George Perez, and I thought that there's more of him. And you were saying that he's not. That's sad.
He's more of an Avengers artist in this period.
He only
Yeah,
done-
and
he did a lot
do
of
some
Avengers.
Fantastic Four. Because I think I have a Fantastic Four Visionaries trade paperback of Perez.
Oh, okay, but yeah, in terms of the booty and stuff, I thought everyone was bootylicious.
Equally delicious.
Well, and speaking of
equal bootylicious.
Speaking of bootylicious, this, I mean, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but this outfit that he put Storm into really does feel like a Beyonce / Destiny's Child stage outfit. I mean,
right?
I feel like so many people, when they've got to send the woman to the fantasy world to do the swords and sorcery stuff, and they've got to be like dressed like this, so often it's just this like really lame bikini. But this thing that Storm has on, it is like fashion, honey. It's like this, it's like J-Lo would wear it. Like it's like this neckline that goes all the way down to her belly button, and then it's got this like very Wonder Woman-esque girdle, and then it's got this sweeping skirt that's with slits all the way up to her thighs. I mean, it's cool. You can tell that Perez really enjoys drawing fashion in a way that Byrne likes drawing like streetwear, and Byrne likes drawing superhero costumes, but Byrne, I don't think, likes drawing fashion as much as Perez.
No, it was very fashionable, and then it's also like not the Western clothes that Storm is always like, oh, please take them away from my eyes. So this is something, when as soon as like she appears, I'm like, ooh, this should have been one page instead of like one long strip on the side. I'm like, damn, that's like a wasted opportunity. But yeah, I mean, it's like also the end. I mean, I guess we are not there yet, but so I'm gonna wait till that.
Oh, you can jump around. It's
fun.
Just
jump. I only have two other things really to talk about in this issue.
Oh,
so
okay. I mean,
roll on.
The thing is though, and this is not a spoiler because it's not a new thing. I mean, so we have the fastball special, and then later on we've been told that these are like mutant technology or synergy or however way you want to call it, so there is some serious mutant synergy going on between Colossus, Storm, and Cyclops, and how they use their power, which is, this is the first time I think I've seen 3 mutants working together. I mean, then we now have 5 and 6, but I'm just saying that it just kind of, I'm not saying where.
No, nobody said anything.
Yeah, no, this isn't anything. But the thing is, it starts with 2 and now 3, like it's like how you kind of use the power together, and I kind of liked it. It was like one of those things like, oh no, we need to save it, like, no, we can't. It's like, well, no, let's find a way to save it. It just I think it read a little better from that point of view, or else it would just be like, oh, another story where they were taken somewhere and they had to fight their way back. So I think I really like that aspect of it.
I completely agree with you. I read this like a year or two ago in my read with the kid, and so I reread it for this, and I was like, I like this a lot more than my rating and my comments from 2 years ago. Why is that? And I just think that it like hits a little differently right now in the Hickman era of X-Men than it hit a year or two ago. It's just a little more fun. It feels like a little more modern, I think, than it felt before, because we're revisiting some of these themes right now. Tyler, what did you think?
I mean, I really like the fact that the X-Men were all working together, and like, in the early parts, remember our main complaints about the fight scenes is like they rush in one after another, but here we have like some really interesting synergy going on. And then I also kind of enjoy the fact that like Colossus just disappear and then appear with like a dragon.
Yes.
That's right.
And then he's like, and then he pulled Cyclops onto it and left Wolverine behind. And Wolverine is like, hey, wait for me, and then grab the dragon's leg. So
that was I'm like, oh, they like, what's her name? Rocket is not here yet, so they need dragons in X-Men, so here we are.
And we will find over the course of the X-Men run, Claremont loves dragon stuff. He loves kind of like sword and sorcery chivalry stuff, and he will find any excuse to insert it into X-Men that he can. If someone can have a dream, if someone can go to an alternate dimension, he is all about it, especially if he gets to use Nightcrawler or Kitty. then it's his favorite, which comes to bear fruit later in Excalibur.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is really the origin of that. This is like Claremont's first go at that kind of story. And actually, it's not bad. It's really not. And the other thing is that it has that environmentalist angle too, which I just don't feel like X-Men get to do a lot. But I mean, they're saving this planet because the planet was illuminated by this ring of light around it. Basically, it's, space dust that formed the ring was giving it its light and its heat. And when that dissipated, which is connected to previous stories, this was originally a character that debuted in Avengers, the light went out. And so they're always this guy is always seeking heroes from Earth to bring to his world to kind of like reignite the sun, which is definitely a theme that we've come back to in X-Men comic books in the future. And so he didn't necessarily go to the Earth to get Storm, but when he meets Storm, he's like, oh, this is going to work. And he brings Storm back. And Storm, again, this is like real growth, is like, well, what if they need me? Like, don't rescue me if they need me. And then Cyclops, showing real growth, is like, well, wait a second, let's not just leave you behind. We have a way to strategize. Maybe I can help this too. And it just, it's not a bad story.
And then also, like, I really like that typically in this fantasy situation is like, oh, we're gonna kidnap the gal, and then we're gonna put her in some weird bikini.
Yeah,
she's gonna
Princess
be our,
Leia,
she's gonna be our captain, like our captain and stuff. But
forced to do what
she'll be forced to do whatever, marry someone, like that, but then this one is like, she's like, no, I mean, I'm here, they gave me this wonderful clothes that none of your mall can provide me, so I'm going to help these people out. And that was actually pretty refreshing. So I really like that. Also, these people, like, for someone who needs humans help, they're really not nice to humans. Like,
no, you would think at some point they could have been like, thanks for saving our whole planet.
They're sending the wrong person to come and get help.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like, you puny human. Bleh. And then it's like, oh, I'm never going to be against a woman. I'm like, ew, gross. Get out of here. I'm not going to help you. You all can die.
Well, they're written very much in that like Asgardian model of they just view all other races and people as kind of like inferior. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
The only other thing really I think to take away from this is I do believe, Tyler, if I'm not mistaken, that these lightning bolts come back into play at least one more time in Claremont's X-Men run, where the guy, he disappears with Storm, and then Cyclops is like, well, I guess we're going to see what these lightning bolts does, and he throws it down, and it's like this interdimensional teleport gate. I do think that comes back at least one more time in Claremont's run.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it came back once. But the other trope that, I mean, not really a trope, but the other constant about X-Men is that they keep destroying machines.
Oh,
they destroy the danger room again.
That's true.
This time it happens all the time. Like how many planes have they down so far?
So many. And that's what I'm saying, like, where's the money come from? Because it's like, how are they fixing these things? Cyclops says it comes from his bank account now, and I'm like, how bottomless is his bank account?
Not very.
We need to get one of those mutants who can fix these things.
Well, speaking of where the Scrooge McDuck of X-Men is right now, we come to our classic X-Men story, because this happens right on the heels of that arcade story we just read. It has to happen before the Proteus saga, because Jean is not with the team, and neither is Professor Xavier. And Xavier's in space, and we got a brief interlude of that back in issue 121 or 122, that we discussed in the we discussed in the last issue.
Yeah,
122. But here in Classic X-Men 31, we have Xavier living the consort life and trying to figure out, in a way that really is part of immigrant chat between the three of us, how does he represent his knowledge, his personhood, his expertise in a society that doesn't necessarily value him as a human, and not as a human, but humans in general. They don't value humans. And what is his place in that? Before I turn it over to the two of you with much more relevant takes probably than I will have there, I also have to point out that Xavier is explicitly dressed as Captain Picard here. And this, I think, I checked the dates, and I think Star Trek The Next Generation would have happened by the time this issue was drawn. So here's the origin of Patrick Stewart cast as Xavier. It's right here. This is Claremont making his original pitch for it.
No, it's not Claremont. It's Is
this Ann Nocenti? This almost feels like a Claremont
This is a
issue.
normal Ann Nocenti story.
Oh, Ann Nocenti masquerading as a regular
normal
person is not a creep show. So, Fariha, what did you think about Professor Xavier Stranger in a Strange Land?
So it's kind of interesting though, because even if we see mutants suffering or mutants being persecuted and stuff, Professor Xavier is actually potentially the least persecuted of them all, because he has his place with the Avengers, his place with the Cabal. Like, he is kind of...
He has privilege. He has several privileges that intersect with being a mutant.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people don't even think of him as mutant. They also almost think of him as a superpowered being, like the same way they think about Doctor Strange or anyone else. So I think this was the first time I actually thought of him as a mutant as well. Because before this, I never did, because I was like, oh, Patrick Stewart, everyone loves him. I'm telling you, before reading comics, I always kind of liked Professor Xavier, that now I'm realizing, oh no, I loved Patrick Stewart. I didn't like Professor Xavier because he is awful. So it's like one of those things. I'm like, yeah, get the taste of your own medicine, son. It's like he doesn't do much for the mutant community as I would like. And then now he's just moping about. And I'm like, okay. But I like the other alien lady, right?
Yeah.
She appeared to be a lady. Like, she's a plumber and she's like, well, what is that?
Things.
Yeah, I'm fixing things. Like, what is it? And it's like, oh, how do you deal with being lowly? I'm like, don't call her lowly, you lowly man. Like, what's wrong with you?
Right, he's applying this assumption that he has from his cultural context that like somebody that keeps the world running. I mean, she's a plumber, but she also like reports directly to Lalandra. It's clear that she has a different status level than like Joe the plumber that Xavier is going to call and treat badly. Now we know how he treats the plumbers who fix the mansion after Colossus lays a steel turd. And so and so he like brings that to here, but then it like helps him realize that other people are just assuming that he's this like worm of a human, because most stories about humans the Shi'ar have heard are about how like backwards that planet must be.
And remember, I talked about that, how much I hate that. I actually also hated it here too. I'm like, oh, come on, seriously, how is it? How is it that only the bad stories coming about? Seriously, no one talk about the good stories?
I'll throw it to Tyler in just a second here, but I have to point out Xavier is making this assumption because at the end, when he goes back to play chess with them, they're like happy to play chess with him. So it's almost like he's heard people say that thing that you're saying, and then he's internalized that, and he's not allowing himself out of his immigrant bubble to see if that's true and truly how people feel or not. But Tyler, why don't you speak on this for a while?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think this is a really clever story, and it's not. I mean, I thought it's pretty funny to see Xavier pouting and feeling inadequate. Yeah, because I mean, he has. I mean, like even when he was when he was in Egypt, he was actually already quite powerful. So and then I believe he inherited the wealth of his estate, right, from his dad. So he has like Peter said, he has been privileged for a long time. So it's interesting to see him being put in his place, justifiably or not justifiably, but and see how he deals with it, which in this case he did not deal with it really well at all.
And then also sorry.
No, I said until the plumber basically fixes it for him.
Pun wordplay. But the thing is, like, homeboy also just burst into a meeting with Lilandra and some other people. Like, you shouldn't be like, hey.
Yeah, I was like, hey,
get out of here. I don't care who you are and stuff. Like, do not put yourself in these other people's, other worlds' politics. You don't know anything.
He's like, well, I, as a leader on Earth of a team of students, let me make a comment on how to run your intergalactic empire.
And by the way, it's not the like group of people we know now. It's the 5 people that he knows.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you can definitely, we did say at the beginning, we could talk a little bit about House of X and Powers of X. You could read the story a little bit differently knowing what we know now about Xavier, which is that he, whether or not he has knowledge of the Shi'ar from some of those past lives he's been filled in on, he definitely recognizes that there are things that he can take from this experience, and he knows he's going to go back to Earth and be with the X-Men again at some point.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of like flavors my read of this now, which is that it's not entirely he's not being altruistic at any point here. Like he's out there to get something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And potentially also, upset that his students died. So that's probably coloring it a little bit. But I think like this is for the first time we saw Professor Xavier the mutant. Chuck Xavier the mutant. I don't think I've ever seen him before. Like, yeah, seriously, never. Like, just go back, and if you guys read or think about it, anytime he shows up, he's just a normal superhero with a lot of power. He never gives that, even Cyclops actually comes off as a mutant, but he never does.
Well, I mean, is he part of the Illuminati now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now I don't know.
He is, right? I mean, not now. I mean, at this point in the story.
Oh, he is?
He is, right? Yeah, so he feels superior because of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's one thing, right?
And he's not out to the general community. It's important to say as a mutant. And even when he leaves Earth, I think he's still seen as a mutant sympathizer, but not necessarily a mutant. But of course, we're saying the people in power, the Franklin Richards, the Reed, the Reed Richards, the Tony Stark, they know that he's a mutant. Yeah.
Or do they?
Well, retrospectively, they do because of Illuminati. I was just looking at the reading order, and some initial Illuminati stuff happens before Giant says X-Men. So they do know.
Oh, okay.
So that, I think, is our chat. Do we have anything else to say about these issues?
For this, no. I mean, I just thought that like it was interesting that I mean, the first time I encountered like 3D chess was in Big Bang Theory. I forgot about this, that Anocenti has mentioned 3D chess before. So.
Well, are you not a Star Trek fan?
No, I'm not.
Oh, our question for discussion should have been about vintage sci-fi. We'll bring that back during the Dark Phoenix saga. Okay. So guess what, y'all? You got to buckle up because we are about to head into the hot section of this epic X-Men reread.
Thank God.
Next episode, we are going to come back and we are reading Uncanny X-Men 125 through 128, which is the Proteus saga. And let me tell you, we are going to be talking a lot about House of X and Powers of X in that episode. So this is your warning to either finally read House of X and Powers of X or potentially skip that episode. And we'll warn you when the episode gets here, but we're going deep. And then after that is the Dark Phoenix saga, which we're going to split across several episodes because there are a lot of classic X-Men issues to read in here. So next episode, we're definitely going to be reading Classic X-Men, I think 32 and 33, and finally go back to take a look at Classic X-Men 7. That could change on the day of, though, as we read them and kind of move them around. And then also, we're going to be kind of wrapping up all of the rest of the Classic X-Men stories by the end of this Dark Phoenix reads, because that's kind of where the Classic X-Men backups stop. So for now, all you need to worry about is reading Proteus for the next time. And if you want to see where all these things fit in order, you need to go to Crushing Crisis, that's with a K, Crushing with a C, Crisis with a K.com, because that is the home to all of my X-Men reading orders and guides and how to collect every X-Men issue ever and just about every Marvel issue from every major franchise ever. So if you go look at the reading order there, you can see kind of what's come before and what's going to be coming even after the Dark Phoenix saga. That's everything that was on my list. Fariha, what else do you have to say?
Can I also say that, I mean, it's kind of, if you can read Marauders as well, just so you can go to the last issue, which was issue 19.
18,
and
18,
just
18,
19,
yeah.
18, 19, and then just because the first 3 pages of that issue.
we will be
reading
very, very cautious in how we explain to you what we're going to spoil in the next episode.
Yeah, that would be kind of nice. Just go read that.
Yeah.
I think you can read that out of order.
And I'm 18. Yeah.
I'm so excited
18,
because I've read and talked about the Dark Phoenix saga many times with many, many people. It's the most famous X-Men story. I have never, not once, gotten to talk about the Proteus saga with another human being before. And that's going to happen in the next episode, which is so much fun because why, Fariha?
X-Men is better when it's read together.
That's right. So I am so excited to come back for our next episode to read with Tyler and Fariha, and with you as well. So until we talk to you then, please be well, and we'll see you soon for Epic X-Men Reread here on Crushing Comics.